I am Bonnie. I am an alcoholic and an addict. I am from Medina, Ohio, and I have 10 months in sobriety.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Hi, everyone. This is John with On the Road of Recovery. I'm sitting here with my sister, Bonnie. She decided to join us today. How old were you when you first started experimenting with drugs or alcohol?
It started out just kind of this thing that happened with a neighbor once. Maybe like 13, 14 is when I was like spending any money I could to get alcohol with friends on the weekend. Usually it was a weekend thing.
Can you tell a couple of stories that really illustrate what your life was like during your active addiction?
Okay, being tackled to the ground by my dad was a good one. Oh yeah, that was fun because I was trying to get my drugs back that he had found, and he had tackled me to the floor and held me down until the police arrived. And that was the worst.
What was it like during your active use with your relationships, whether it was with your family or your friends?
My friends, I didn't have friends unless they were in addiction. Period. I didn't want to. If you didn't do anything, if I met you and you didn't party, you didn't drink or anything, I just kind of brushed you off. Relationship with my family, there wasn't any. I didn't want to be around them, which I thought when I was in addiction was because I didn't like them and they were this and they were that, but really it was me not wanting them to see who I was or how I was being or anything like that. So they were definitely strained relationships, toxic relationships. I was in a really, really toxic relationship through the last few years of my addiction, and we just fed into each other.
So when did it really start to take over your life?
Over my life, when I got into meth. That's when it started taking over my life. Nothing mattered except getting that and finding that, no matter what time of day, no matter what I was doing, who I was going to see or anything. That was my main concern. How was I going to get high? How was I going to get that? And that was the last 3 years.
Was it that long?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
3 years.
I kind of knew, but I didn't know.
Right. 3 years.
Yeah. If you can recall, describe the few weeks left in your active addiction before finding recovery.
Whether it was, leaving my kids, whether it was whatever, it was just chaos. That's the best way to explain it.
During your active use, how did it make you feel, or were there moments when you kind of like thought about things, or was it just this like resentment and this, like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to be a part of it, like that kind of stuff? What was it like for you?
Yeah, I felt like we were in like two completely different worlds, and I didn't want anything to do with that world at the time.
Right.
Right. And it just, it wasn't, like you said earlier, the last couple weeks of my addiction that I really actually thought about it.
Yeah.
At all. But before that, I didn't care to. I didn't want to. Not a thought in my head.
Did you experience any meth psychosis during?
I thankfully didn't. With my ex, he did hardcore.
Yeah.
And I was very thankful I didn't ever experience anything like that.
How was your relationship with your children then and now?
It wasn't terrible. I was just absent-minded when I was in addiction. I took them and did fun things as much as I could. We played a lot, but even they have mentioned to me that they, enjoy this because I have fun with them. We joke, we play, that kind of thing. And I thought I was doing that before, and it wasn't until I got sober. And just every day I see it a little more with them of how much better it is.
What do you do today to maintain your sobriety?
So I have a great network of people that I can reach out to at any moment. And that's like super important to me because you hear in sobriety a lot, your first thought's wrong. And realized that that's absolutely true. That's
true.
absolutely true. And
true.
half the time I way overcomplicate things. So it's like just picking up the phone and calling someone or calling 10 people to get advice or whatever. I do a lot of meditation. That's like one of my saviors for sure. And a lot of meetings. You know, that's another thing is that I've heard people say so many times, you know, I need a meeting. I'm so frustrated. I need a meeting. And even in like way early recovery, I didn't understand that. And I was like, maybe because I had to do so many meetings, you know, being in sober living, that I didn't understand that until actually just recently. And I went to like 2 meetings a couple weeks ago, 2 meetings the week after that. And I was like, okay, I need some meetings. Like I need meetings right now. And there wasn't even anything going on. I wasn't stressed or anything, but I could just feel I just got a thought in my head the other day, like, okay, let's go get something. And it was just a passing thought, but it's like, okay, I need a meeting, you know?
What dreams have come true for you so far?
Just like opportunities that are coming to me. And people want me to come help them and want me to work with them. You know, that's been huge. Just things falling right in my lap.
What hopes do you have for the future?
I would like to work and further work in the sobriety or the, you know, sober community and just make a difference.
Can you describe a certain feeling that you had in your sobriety that was not there during your addiction?
Happiness. Absolutely. Joy.
What have you learned from your addiction?
That it, you know, you don't, in your mind, you don't think you're hurting people. You don't want to hurt people, but it does. And it hurts a lot of people. And you don't realize that when you're in addiction.
What words of hope could you share with someone who's trying to get sober?
It works. And, you know, a lot of it at first is really overwhelming, but the reward is so great. And the knowledge you get is so great. And just keep trying. Keep doing it.
What was one of the things that you experienced that kind of encouraged your addiction?
Like the codependency on my mom, on you, on, you know, all of it, and taking advantage of it. I knew how to work Mom. I knew how to you know, get money from her or even emotional support if I needed it. I knew how to get it from her. You know what I mean? I knew how to just play her. So yeah, I think that was like a big part of it.
Right. You know, there is something to be said about the love of a mother and how a lot of times mothers feel that they're doing or helping in some way because they don't want to see their child dead. They don't want to see, and so they feel like rather than you going to the streets or doing whatever, I'm going to make sure that my children are taken care of and stuff like that. And you know, it's hard because there's no blame on that. We're the ones with the substance use disorder. The boundaries that are set today or whatever are very different than what they were before. Like I really as an amends to my parents, I don't or try not to call them in anguish or, you know, about like I used to call all the time about somebody being mean to me at work and just like and get her worked up, and it really had nothing to do with her or her family or anything like that. And so there was really no need for me to even have those conversations, and I would do it as a form of manipulation, whether it was in that moment to get money or drugs or leading up to, it was very calculated, leading up to, well, in 2 days I can call her and be like, oh my gosh, I lost my job or whatever, and then Mom, I need money, I need to pay rent. And then usually, you know, that's the hard part, is like the guilt that I feel about calling and saying, hey, I need money for rent, and then using it, literally turning directly around and taking
Right.
it to go get drugs.
Even if you intended on using it.
I
towards
know,
rent.
I know.
You
And
know,
you did, but the
even-
minute that you have that money in your hand, you're
It's
like,
out the
well, I
window.
can go to the east side of
Right.
Cleveland real quick. One of the stories that I remember that I kind of talk about sometimes in my lead is a little bit is that that moment I was in Cleveland, and I was buying some stuff, and I got pulled over, and it was money that she had given me. So knowing that if I would have gone to prison, which I should have gone to prison in those moments, but I had a lot of stuff on me, and I had just spent a lot of money that she had given me, and I was stopped, and he wanted to search my car, and I said no, and it was this whole thing. And I remember, thinking, well, she did this. You know what I mean? Like, she gave me the money. She shouldn't have and
Sure.
thinking of a way to blame that on someone else immediately it's such our go-to. Do you have any incidents like that you felt like in those moments, like, oh, like I shouldn't have done this?
Absolutely. I mean, all the time. I wanted to blame everyone else, whether it was mom, whether it was, my ex, whoever it was. I felt like the blame was never on me, ever,
Right.
ever.
Right.
Even when everything happened that led up to me going to spend the night in jail, and, it was all dad and mom,
Right.
and you.
Right.
None of it was my fault.
Right.
None of it was my fault.
Right.
And now looking back, that's such a crazy thing to think.
Right. It was needed, and I that was what I had told mom and dad that day. I remember sitting there with them and having this conversation, and I was like, this could be that moment, but you guys have to set those boundaries. This is that moment. That's the aha moment. It
Right.
could be if you can do that. I'm so grateful that it happened today.
I am too.
I mean, it was really, for those of you, do you mind if I share
No.
the story? So I was at home. I could tell something was going on. You came home and you were upset, and then her ex shows up at the driveway and is like yelling, and then my dad goes out and he's got a gun because that's just what he does. I called the police. And then I left. I was like, I've got to go, because it was triggering for me, because I was sitting there like, I think my biggest thing was walking upstairs, and this was that night, but earlier, it was that night, but earlier in the night, and I had walked past your room, and I saw your box open, and I went right down. I said, you've got to do, and my dad's like, just go get it, and I'm like, no, like, I can't go get it, like, I can't, like, it's just, I just can't be around it. And of course then he yelled at me, and I went to get it and brought it down.
Yeah.
But and so I, that was really hard, because that was the first time, I think, in my parents' life where they saw those things and they asked questions. What is this? And I'm like, that is for meth, and that's what's on there. And I told dad and mom, I was like, because I don't do it, and I know fentanyl is such a huge thing, and I was like, I told them, get gloves. I was like, don't touch anything without a glove, like, you just don't know. And it just was, I think it was a very scary time for them, and a scary time for you. And I know that I did the right thing, but I also, worried that, like, you would never speak to me again, and that would be the end.
Have I ever not spoken to you again?
We're so dramatic.
I know.
And that's why, like, I joke about it when you post this stuff. I always say, keep coming back, because
Yeah.
it's like, that's like literally my thought, because I see it a lot.
Yeah.
So. What are some things that have changed for the positive right now in your relationships with family, friends, all of that?
I've lived with mom and dad for a while now, and and at the end of my addiction, and then now in recovery. And before, I'd just like come home and go upstairs or figure out a way to leave or whatever. Now it's like I sit down, I have conversations with them. So I love that. I like having like honest friendships, true friendships. That's so huge. Like, I didn't think I could become this close with some people. And it's hard too, because people go back out, but that's that can't stop you from
building good relationships. So you had mentioned earlier about employment and how like you really hadn't had any real employment in a really long time. How does it feel now?
I like getting up in the morning. I like,
What do you do?
I clean for Target, but I work for like a cleaning company. So that's actually been really fun, surprisingly. Who would have thought I would have liked cleaning? But I do. I also am part-time at HRC. So
What is HRC?
Hope Recovery Community. So I'm also working part-time in recovery. So that's been great. And I just want to further. Whether it's sober living, whether it's, a rehab facility, whatever. I would like to expand on that.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. What's the difference between the friendships that you had back then and the friendships now?
These people I can call every single day at any time of day and they answer. And they don't, butter me up because they want something or, need something from me or, vice versa. I don't have to butter them up because I want something from them. They give me the straight up, like, honest truth when I ask for advice, which, I don't always like, but usually 9 times out of 10, they're right. What are some things that you're still, whether it's amends or something like that, that you're still struggling with today? Definitely amends. I mean, I just always want to try and show them that I'm, a good person because I feel like I wasn't for so long. And it's not that I wasn't a good person. I was in active addiction. If you could share what your relationship is now with Jessica. I feel like there was no relationship when I was in addiction. Now it's better. I'm gonna cry. I wish it was even better than what it is. Because I feel like I don't see and talk to her a lot, but I feel like I have a lot going on and she has a lot going on. But when we are together, I love it. I feel like we're working on it. And that's all I can ask for. So, for those of you who don't know, we had someone that we felt was a sister to us, Sarah Handy Hoisington, and she was a sister to all of us. Someone that was always in your life that we just knew, and whether or not there was drug use going on or not, I know some people think that it was like this toxic kind of thing, and it probably was in a way. It more enabling, I think, than anything. But she passed away. It's been 5 years. Is that right? I have to say, for me and my recovery, it was really important that happened. Even though it would be something that I would obviously go back and fix and try to change, I also have a little bit of guilt still about, she would talk about recovery and she would talk about not doing it, but like I wish that I would have known what I know now and been able to connect her with the right people, places, and things. And I can tell you now, personally, a lot of what I do is for that reason, for her and Gage. And so why don't, if you don't mind, sharing a little bit about your relationship with her and then how it changed and then her death. She was, my sister, and I've known her since I was 10. We were always drunk together, high together. We went through a lot together. Other deaths, just life. We went through a lot of life together. Toward the end, there was definitely some tension between the two of us because she needed help. She wanted the help, but when she got help sometimes, I I felt like she used it in the wrong way. And that wasn't really for me to judge, but, you know, and then something like her death, you know, happened, and that was one of those things where the first thing out of my mouth when I heard was, I knew it. I knew it was coming. You know, you can't be prepared for something like that.
Right.
But you always had it in your head. And it's one of those things now where it's like, I love being sober, and I wish that I could. I wish that she could have done this.
Me too.
I really do. I really wish that she could have done this. And, you know, I thought about that often when I was in rehab, and I think about it often now that, like, I'm just like, God, why couldn't you have done this, Sarah? Why couldn't you have done this?
One of the biggest pieces for me was the acceptance of a higher power. And that my first sponsor, the first session that I ever had with him, he looked at me and he said, "You are not in control, and you never were." And I literally, it rings in my head today, when I'm struggling with something like that, a death or passing, or just struggling in life in general. I'm not in control, and I never was. I truly believe that Sarah and her passing was sent here for us to be here today. And it's not fair, and I wish that there wasn't so much stigma behind it. How many times I felt so hypocritical a lot of times. How many times did we sit there and talk with everybody about Sarah's addiction and how terrible it was, and how we wanted to help, but no one could find help, one. And two, we're in active addiction, so we're just covering up and masking our own stuff, you know. And it was like we would say that, like, oh, you know, and then we'd call her and be like, hey, can we get some 30s? Or, you know what I mean? Like, there was so much behind that. My addiction grew so much worse in that 2 years because of that it got me to my bottom, to be able, I don't want to say my bottom, but the bottom at that moment. It was that. And that, you know, that was when I really didn't care. And then the only way to stay connected to her was through her family and finding stuff like that. And so it was like really hard. And then there was, you know, my reaction, I know, was really terrible towards the family, because I was like, you didn't do enough. And now, knowing what I know, they did exactly what they needed to do. And even after, they did exactly what they needed to do, which is so hard as a family to set those boundaries and be like, no, this isn't going to happen, and this is what we're going to do from this point forward, you know, to save her children and stuff like that. I always felt, and I could be wrong, I always felt like you just completely shut down after that, and that you didn't really process
After Sarah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I did either, at all. That's when everything for me got so much worse. You know, after she had passed away, it was just a complete downward spiral. It was an everyday hardcore, just everything revolved around getting high, which is so crazy looking back. And it's like you lose someone this way, and yet you're doing the same thing, except, you know, you're going harder and harder. And it's crazy in my mind that's how we, or how I know. You know, grieved, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because like those traumatic experiences, and when you experience trauma, whether it's a sudden death of a friend or family or something like that, that is a traumatic experience. And so when we go through that, we really all we want to do is escape. All I wanted to do was escape. I just didn't want to acknowledge or deal with it. I grieve in a very loud way, and I feel like you grieved silently?
You know, I actually have a really cool story. So for those of you that don't know, Sarah was our ladybug. She was my ladybug. And I was in rehab, like 2 weeks into rehab, and I was ready to leave. I was packing my shit. I was like, give me the phone. I'm making a phone call. I'm getting out of here. And I'm outside smoking a cigarette. And a few of my friends are like standing around me. And I'm just sitting here crying. I'm leaving, all of this stuff. And they're all just staring at me. And they're like, Bonnie, you need to turn around. And there was a whole wall of ladybugs outside. And I think, that's one of the things that made me stay in rehab. But I feel like that was like part of me accepting everything and trying to, accept what had happened, accept me, being an addict, and accepting what had happened to her, because at that point I hadn't, and it had been 4 years.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because I have those moments all the time where I'm having a bad day and a ladybug is in my car, or a ladybug lands on me and stuff like that. And I know that happens like a lot in people's lives. But when you see it and you acknowledge, like, immediately, like, that person is around, I just think it's just really profound. And the memory of her has helped me through a lot of different times and a lot of different moments in my recovery. Even still, she's a main player in it, and whether she's gone or not, that's okay. I know that she's still around, or still valued. What's the thing you're most proud of?
Keeping my sobriety, and I feel like I'm working every day, but just building relationships back with my family, with my kids especially, playing with them, just all of the above.
Do you know about the mental obsession?
So I was going to say, so I'm like doing something in my ordinary daily life, and then that just, the thought of using or something just pops into my head, whether it's like a passing thought or whatever, but it's just because that's my old habits, that's my old, all of the above.
Oh, what are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for you.
Aww.
Grateful for this. I'm grateful for my recovery, my kids, the support that I've gotten, sober living, just the people that are in my life today. That's a huge one.
During your active use, what were some stigmas that you placed on either me in the early recovery or people in general in the recovery community?
That's why I never wanted to come, where you were or anything like that, because I felt like I wouldn't fit in and stuff like that. And I know that that's not the case. A
lot of people in early recovery do that same thing where, like, they're like, oh, this meeting and they said this and da-da. Have you ever had one of those moments where, like, someone has said something that you didn't like, or you didn't want to be around? Not specific, just in general.
Sure. Yeah. I have. I usually just get up and leave if it's completely, out of whack.
Telling the newcomer, like what you just said was really good, because it's like, okay, like, even though I might not go back to that meeting, or I still go back to these meetings, I can still get something from those people that said something that I didn't appreciate before. And I think that's really good for the newcomer. What is another thing that you could tell someone who is coming in new to recovery?
All of this is uncomfortable. All of it is uncomfortable. But it's getting outside of your comfort zone from the very beginning. Ask questions, take numbers, do all the things. I really am a strong believer that there's not a stupid question. And that was one thing for me, is I was just kind of thrown into this, whether it was rehab or sober living or anything. And I wouldn't have gotten by had I not, even at meetings, had I not asked questions. I didn't know how meetings went, different formats, different meetings. So ask questions, be curious.
What are some tangible and intangible gifts that you've got?
Knowledge. I really like knowledge, and I think I've always really liked having knowledge. I mean, even if it's about stupid stuff, do have dad as a dad, who has knowledge of everything, you know. So
Little bit about everything.
I like knowledge, but, you know, looking back at when I first left for, you know, detox and rehab compared to now, and I still am like learning different things all the time. I love that. I love the knowledge. You know, at first, when I first started working, that was like a scary thought to me, is having any kind of money at all in my possession. But you just taught me to buy Vans with it.
I got a
So
new pair.
Vans. Vans are my
Vans.
tangible ones.
Gotta love it. Bonnie, thank you for coming out to the farm today to be able to do this recording. Your story is going to help so many people that think they're alone and they have no hope. You are proof that there is a way out of addiction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.